Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I am doing a solo episode today. I've done maybe one in almost 6 years of podcasting. And I thought about it. I was supposed to have a guest, but he had horrible Wi-Fi connection. He was on vacation. The girl, meaning your friend Meghan, actually, well, I air dried my hair, so it's still kind of wet. I put makeup on, I put a dress on. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to come on here today and talk about current events and just some of the ways that I've been feeling lately. And I wanted to reach out to all of you and say thank you for your years. If you've been listening since the beginning, for your years of listening. And if you're a new listener, thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me a listen. And I appreciate my listeners more than any of you will ever understand. If you are so inclined, please leave me a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening. And I'm just going to start here. So in 2020, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? That's so embarrassing. I don't want to talk about the fact that I have, in quotes, a mental illness, which I don't believe in calling it an illness. I just believe in calling it what it is. It's something that makes my brain a little bit different. And what complex PTSD is, it's a form of PTSD stemming from childhood, my past, things that happened to me as a little girl. So this started, my PTSD, my complex PTSD really started when a lot of my listeners obviously know, when I witnessed my sister, my mom had put me in a high chair and was feeding me breakfast when I was 2. And my sister had been diagnosed with rare liver disease. And she had just come back from seeing the doctor, and she had some kind of stomach bug or something wrong with her. And my mom, had put her down that night, not thinking anything other than, she would wake up in the morning. My mom would get her out of her crib and go back to her regular day. So my mom found her, and she had passed in her sleep, and had called the paramedics. My mom kind of was stopped in her tracks, screaming, went out to the neighbors. And, obviously finding your child not breathing and unalive is horrific for any mother. I can't even imagine what my mom went through. And so much of me carries a lot of guilt for that into my adulthood. So those events that I witnessed kind of started my lifelong struggles with anxiety and depression. My mom has told me that I was a really happy baby. I was funny. I was potty trained. I was 2. Doing well. And after witnessing what I witnessed, I went backwards. I started to have accidents again and was back in diapers. And I think I carried this guilt because my little tiny brain didn't understand what I had witnessed or what my body was going through. And they say the first 3 years of a child's brain, or the developing of a brain, are vital. And if you experience trauma, there's a good chance that you're going to go into your later life and have a diagnosis like mine. So, my mom and I and my dad, who is still alive, were finding ways to deal with my depression and anxiety that I carried as a little girl growing up, to the point that when I got into, I think I was 8 or 9, and I would have these horrible reoccurring nightmares that I picked my sister up out of her crib and took her down a hallway and flushed her down the toilet. And I could not stop having these dreams. I remember waking up and crying and just being terrified. And it was the guilt. I think it was survivor's guilt that I really carried. So, I went on to, every time my parents would go on a vacation, I would sit in my closet, rocking back and forth. They would leave us with a babysitter or our one babysitter, Mrs. Logston, who I don't think liked me that much because I was kind of a troublemaker. They would find me. I would be in my closet in our house on Weatherwood Court. I'd just be in this closet, holding my legs, rocking back and forth, thinking, are they going to come back? It's something that, please God, I did a lot of praying as a child. Please God, don't let anything happen to my mom and dad. Please God, I'll do anything if you just let them come back. And to think about that, and again, I'm probably going to get emotional on this episode. It's kind of like a therapy session with myself and all of you. And I think it's okay to talk about these things. That's why I do this podcast, because maybe somebody out there went through a loss like mine when they were little and they're still trying to process it. I think I'm doing a lot better. You know, for a very long time, I could not even talk about this without crying or just going back to a really dark, dark place. And so I feel like this process of dealing with these memories are I'm on my way, but I'm always going to struggle with them because they were hard. Anyways, so I went on to kind of have some issues in school as a kid. I didn't really understand how to foster relationships with other kids. I was very artistic. I kind of escaped into characters. I always wanted to sing and dance. I came out that way. My parents joke that I had a character name of Joanna, which is so funny. When I was 3 years old, there's this tape of me. That's how old I am. Talking about my parents were like, "What's your name, little girl?" And my name was Joanna. So always kind of been my stage name. And so I always escaped into this world of characters and not really feeling good in my skin and just wanting so much to be liked. I mean, I remember being, at Our Lady of Mercy School in Potomac, Maryland, where I grew up, and I wanted so badly to be friends with I'm not going to use names because I just don't want to. I'm going to name her Christina. I wanted so badly to be friends with this girl, Christina. And I would come to school every day, and Christina was the prettiest in the class and the most popular. And from 4th to 6th grade, I kind of had buck teeth and a bowl cut and was just a little different. And I would bring her presents, and I just wanted to be liked. I wanted people to like me, and I wanted to be funny, and I wanted to be pretty, and I wanted to be all these things. And so I just felt like that was something that went along with what I've been diagnosed with as an adult, which again is complex PTSD. So, I went on to kind of get into a therapy group. I think I just touched on this, and it was group therapy, and it was with the psychiatrist and a bunch of other kids. And I talked through at that young age, 9 or 10, my fears, my anxiety, which I always have struggled with, and got through that period where the reoccurring dreams stopped for a while. And then turns out, I went on to, grow. I did better in school. I never did well academically, but I started to, all the girls wanted to be my friend because I grew and I lost weight, because at the time my mom had she was trying to help me, and she had bribed me to lose 20 pounds. And if I did it, I would get a Benetton wardrobe, a whole new, that's how old I am. I keep saying that, but I just feel like a dinosaur sometimes. At the time, these Benetton rugbies were really in, and they had stripes on them, and Benetton was the thing. Benetton and Esprit. And so my mom said, I'm gonna buy you this wardrobe. Let's just try and get your weight under control. And so I grew, and I lost this 20 pounds, and all of a sudden girls wanted to be my friend and boys started paying attention to me. And this was going into 7th grade, I would say. So in the fall of my 7th grade year, I went to this, I don't know what it was. Well, actually, go backwards a little bit. Going into seventh grade, yeah, it was the fall of seventh grade. Over the sixth grade summer, I had this boy in my class, and he said, do you want to go? Do you want to go out? Do you want to go, be my girlfriend? And so that was really the first time I kind of had this little boyfriend. And in the fall of my seventh grade year, we had this dance, and the boy was walking down the hill to my school because he lived right near the school, and he got hit from behind by a young driver, and he flew up in the air, and he hit his head, and he had to be medevaced to the hospital. And I'll never forget that day, because it was this little period of time in seventh grade, very beginning of the year, and he was medevaced we all watched him from the field. I sat on the swing set, and in that exact week, my dad had been diagnosed with leukemia. And right before that, I had been at like a mini golf place, and I saw this teenage boy run across the street, and he had been hit by a car, and he died. So it was these events all in a very short period of time. So the boy ended up passing away, and my dad in the same week had been diagnosed with this cancer called leukemia, and he had a rare form of leukemia, and at the time really there was no way for him to get better. I mean, I think the chances of him going into remission and living were very, very small. So I tell you all of this because it was the first thing of losing my sister, and then the second of losing my dad, being diagnosed at 12 and then dying 9 months later. At that period, I found myself really not understanding how to live. Like, my brain, I don't think processed or thought about suicide or any of those things, but I just remember thinking, how does my 13 at the time year old brain keep going? How do I show up as my genuine self? How do I not deal with constant anxiety? And I just kept going. I kept going. And I was diagnosed. My mom started taking me to the therapist again, who was an excellent therapist. Her name was Linda Cimaresti. And if she's still around, she's the best therapist, aside from Dr. Nay, who I talk about all the time. That was my adult therapist. But she had me tested for ADHD because I didn't ever do well in school. And at the time, that really wasn't a diagnosis. But I was diagnosed with at the time it was ADD. And I started to realize that I was going to hide even more at that point. I was going to hide who I was. And I really hid behind my sense of humor and making people laugh and not wanting to be in touch with the person that I really was, because to be honest, I don't even really think that I knew who I was. I think I was just this 13-year-old girl that was like, okay, I have decisions to make in this life. I'm going to either have to deal with this massive amount of grief in these short 13 years, or I'm going to keep going, and I'm just going to figure out how to keep going. Well, cut to the day, and I've talked about this many, many times for you listeners. Cut to the day after my dad's funeral. And I remember being at that funeral, and I just think my brain couldn't understand really what was going on. And at the time, I sang Morning Has Broken because I always grew up singing. And when my dad was sick, I would sing for him on our deck on Weatherwood Court, my favorite house I ever lived on in the best neighborhood. And I sang that song and I remember thinking, who's here? The church was packed. There were people out into the parking lot. And I didn't really even think about what the finality of what was actually happening, that he was actually gone, because my brain could not understand that he was gone forever. And, death, when you're a kid and you're dealing with the loss of a parent, it's tremendously hard. So I think all the time when I hear about the wars going on or just the amount of loss that children have, it's really hard for somebody that has gone through it to not really feel bad. And then that's where the layer of empathy really grows. So I would say at that point, that's really when I started to become more empathetic to other people, which is, I always say, kind of my superpower, but it's also something that makes me so tremendously sensitive that it's very difficult sometimes to be this way, because you take things way harder than I think most people do. So I met my best friend, Julie, that very next day after my dad passed away. And she walked around the circle. We had become members of Congressional Country Club in Washington, D.C. And I know I have a lot of listeners in Maryland and D.C. And I hope that when I'm telling these stories, like, you understand how much I loved growing up in such a beautiful place, and how I'm so lucky that I still have lifelong friends from my childhood, that, my best friend, Kara, Carter, all of my friends that I love so much. And when I go back, I pick up where I left off. So that's a very special gift that I've been given. So I went on to meet Julie that day, walking around the circle at Congressional. I was looking at the ground, and I've told this story probably 5 million times on the podcast. And I told it recently to Bruce and Donna, that were on, Julie's dad and mom, that came on in October, if you listen to that episode. And we lost Bruce in November. So I think I'm still processing that. And I think everyone that loved Bruce is processing that too. But that day, he comes driving up to me in this Lincoln Town Car, this black Lincoln Town Car, and the windows go down, and all 4 of the Ellis girls are in the car. And he said, "This is Julie." And that's the day after my dad's funeral, I met my best friend. So I went on to have just the most amazing relationship with this human. And I talk a lot on the podcast about all the signs. That's how I started talking about signs, is because Julie was I say a lot, my soulmate. And she became my world. Her family became my family. They took me in. My mom had gone on to marry a few years later, what I call the original Dirty John. He was horrifically horrible to my brother and I, who were still living at home. And I kind of had been sent away to boarding school, and Julie was always there for me. So we were together for many years. We went through high school, even though I was away. We went through college together. We went through our young adulthood together. When I met my husband, who I've just celebrated my 25th anniversary with this week, she met Ron, and we just had the most incredible relationship. In a lot of ways, I say all the time, she was my savior. So when we lost Julie in 2003, I think that forever changed me. I think as I'm growing older, and I realized in 2020 my diagnosis of complex PTSD, that all of that trauma, all of the loss just kept going. And I say all the time, I kept going, and I would just push things down. I would escape. I tried to be an actress unsuccessfully, but I was an actress. I was a singer. I still am. I still have the theater kid in me and the singer and all of this stuff. But I think kind of why I wanted to talk about this today in particular, because I've never really talked about what it's been like to be diagnosed in my 40s with what I have, is it can be kind of embarrassing to other people, even to put it on social media. We all want to look good. We all want to have our social media presence of looking a certain way. But I have to be real with all of you and people in general that might follow me and be like, what is wrong? Is she crazy? No, I'm not crazy. I think anybody that is called crazy I think number one, it's horribly mean. And none of this is my fault. Just like if I was diagnosed with bipolar or manic depression, none of this is our fault. Anybody that has a diagnosis, mine is a little bit different because it's stemming from a great deal, like a PTSD from my childhood. So part of why I wanted to talk about this today was as I grew and I lost Julie so tragically. We all lost Julie, all of her friends. Nobody loved Julie. Everybody equally loved Julie. You could say to anyone, oh, did you know Julie Ellis Lamont? And everybody in the DC area loved Julie. She did not have a mean bone in her body. She was the most amazing human I've literally ever met in my whole life. And to go on without her is still so hard. I think part of why I talk about grief so much, and I have so many episodes about grief and signs, is because I say that they're just in the next room. And I really, truly believe that, because there's been so many times that I've needed her, I've talked to her, and I don't necessarily feel like I connect with my dad. It's not like I don't think he's there, but I think he's everywhere. I think that Julie in particular her spirit, her soul is somehow very connected to mine. And she comes to me when I really need her. And it's in the form of a butterfly, or it's in the form of a song, or I can feel she's with me. So that's why I talk about signs so much on the podcast. Anyways, so as I moved through my adult life, so I was still only in my late 20s when I lost Julie. And then I felt like on paper, or whatever it is, whatever we're supposed to do in society. Oh, I loved my husband. I wanted to get married so badly because that's what you do next. And I wanted to have a baby so badly. And then I lost we were pregnant, and we had a loss with our first pregnancy, and it was really traumatic. And then went on to get pregnant with my daughter now. And I've been lucky enough to be a mom of 2 daughters that are my whole world. But I just thought I could just push all of this stuff down. And I spent a lot of years doing it until in 2020, I was at my breaking point. I didn't really understand what it was like to be in a friendship with somebody and have somebody hurt you. I think the triggering from my childhood and being so fortunate with friends from my childhood and still being close to them to this day, I didn't understand that sometimes women can be incredibly cruel. So I got myself into a friendship that was very, very unhealthy. I've talked about it a lot. And in this friend group, and there was a lot of horribly mean behavior, and I ended up getting out and have it kind of falling on my knees. I was at my wit's end in 2020. I was in there. I went to therapy because I had been referred to a therapist that, dealt with abuse and all kinds of issues with women. And she ended up, it was Dr. Nadine Macaluso, who I met in 2019 through 2020 when I was really going through this friend breakup. Started having all kinds of hormonal issues. I had fibroids. I'm spilling my guts to you guys, but my point is I put on all this weight. I was drinking too much. I was just at this point of desperation. It was COVID. I had my friends were all, in different parts of the country. My whole friend group that I had made had completely abandoned me. I couldn't even go to a Target without them turning the opposite direction. There's episodes about this whole thing because I talk a lot about mean moms and that kind of stuff. But I spent so much time trying to understand what's wrong with me. Why would they do this to me? Why would they be so incredibly cruel? What did I do? What's wrong with me? I ended up getting diagnosed. I went to a psychiatrist. I got put on medication. I started to see that there was a way out. But at my very lowest point, I was suicidal. I spent a lot of 2020 and that period of time being awake at night, not wanting to go on. So I would just wake up in the middle of the night and I would toss and turn and I would think, oh, the world would be so much better if I wasn't here. And my husband's such a great dad. He could do this without me. And, maybe I'm not the best mom. And, I spent a lot of my life really beating myself up, saying, well, what's wrong with me? But faking it. Like I was super confident. I still do it because I still struggle with all of this stuff. Today, I followed somebody. The Instagram's called In This Together Now. And she posted a slide and I think that's part of why I'm doing this episode. Because every once in a while, Instagram and social media is the best thing ever. I learn so many great things and I've made so many great connections. It's also horrible for me and horrible for everyone. But if you look at the good things, like figuring out something like this. So this slide that I saw today it says complex PTSD, CPTSD, and suicidality. And it's a gentle conversation for anyone who relates. And this is what it says. It's not always wanting to die. For many people with CPTSD, suicidality isn't about wanting life to end. It's often about wanting the pain, fear, or overwhelm to stop. Sometimes it's a survival response, not a choice. When your nervous system hits a limit, complex PTSD can help your body stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or shut down. When your system is overloaded for too long, your brain may start looking for an exit in quotes kind of feeling. This can happen even if you don't actually want to leave the people you love. Triggers can make it feel in right now. With complex PTSD, triggers don't always feel like memories. They can feel like your body is reliving it in the past. Reliving it in the present. Your brain may think, if I can't escape this, I can't survive it. If I can't escape this, I can't survive it. Passive suicidality can be quiet. Suicidal thoughts don't always sound dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. I don't want to be here. I wish I could disappear. I'm tired of existing. I can't keep doing this. These thoughts still matter and everyone deserves support. Shame and self-blame fuel it. Complex PTSD often comes with deep shame like, I'm too much. Hello, that's me. I ruin everything. That's me. I'm not lovable and I don't deserve help. And I read this today and I was just like, oh my God. Oh, this is a good one too. It can feel like you're a burden. A lot of people with complex PTSD don't reach out because they feel guilty. They may worry they're dramatic. I get that all the time. Oh, Meghan, you're so dramatic, or attention seeking. But needing support when you're struggling is human. You were never meant to carry this alone. Suicidal thoughts are often a sign of emotional overload, nervous system collapse, unmet needs, unprocessed trauma or pain, and feeling trapped or powerless. So I read this today and I just went, oh my God, I understand all of that. I need to talk about this on the podcast. It's also a diagnosis that's kind of new. So I think that a lot of people don't understand it and they just go, oh, like that doesn't make any sense. But for somebody that lives with complex PTSD, I relate to all of those things. And my brain sometimes still says the world would be so much better off without me. And I still struggle with that. But I have gotten help over the years. I limit my alcohol. I mean, lately with what's going on in the world, I'm going to be honest. I have been drinking too much and I'm trying to get that under a little bit more under control. That's always been kind of a crutch for me and it's not a healthy one. So I don't know. I think that what I care about more so than anything else when I do this weekly podcast is that I hope that somebody might be listening out there and think, I'm feeling really helpless right now. I'm feeling really hopeless. And I think there's a lot of people right now that feel that way, especially if you're living in America or other countries of war or, horrible things that are going on in so many places, starvation, people going through horrible, horrible things. And you feel hopeless and you feel like giving up. I just have to remind myself that there's so many of us out there that are dealing with deep, deep pain and deep, deep anxiety. And I just hope that when you listen every week, and today I shared, probably I was a little TMI, which is not shocking because I tell everyone everything about me sometimes and I'm a big mouth, but I also do it because it helps heal myself. But my goal in life is just to help someone else feel seen and help, especially if you're carrying all of this grief and all the hard things that we deal with in life and you feel hopeless. I hope that every week when you listen and you hear somebody's story that you think, well, they got through it, so can I. And when I saw that slide today and the guest had bad Wi-Fi, it wasn't his fault. I just felt kind of called to talk to all of you and tell you that. So if you're a new listener and you didn't know any of that, I'm okay. I still struggle. I've talked a lot about that lately and I've thought, well, maybe I shouldn't do the podcast anymore. Maybe I've done the almost 270 episodes and I should take a break. And then I meet somebody new or I have a new guest come on and it really fuels and helps me. And I just want to normalize all of us being able to talk about hard things. So we're going through a hard time. We're going through a hard time in our country. There's a lot of hate. There's racism. There's pain. There's grief. People are struggling financially. There's so many hard things all around us. I just want to reiterate to all of you that there's always hope. There's always help. There's always someone. I say to you, you reach out to me, listeners. I love it. I love when my listeners reach out to me because it makes me feel heard and seen. And a lot of times when you're a podcaster, you kind of feel like, I see the numbers and I see that people are listening, but who are you? So if you ever want to reach out to me, just know there's nothing I love more than hearing from my listeners. And like I said, I say all the time, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. So I love you all. Thank you for this. How long was that episode? I just talked for 35 minutes straight. So there you go. I love you all. Keep going. You matter. Your story matters.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.